People love to invent monsters to explain the things they see not understand. It's a defense mechanism, a psychological firewall we build to keep the chaos at bay. We talk about the Wendigo in the northern woods, spirits that mimic human voices to lure you off the path, or cinematic serial killers who wear masks and leave riddles. We do this because if the monster is supernatural or at least theatrically insane, it feels distant. Feels like something that follows rules. But I am a man of facts, figures, and vital signs. I am a paramedic. I work in a world of systolic blood pressure, pupillary response, and the Glasgow Coma Scale. I know that when a heart stops, it's not a spiritual event. It's an electrical failure. I know that my sister, Emma, did not vanish into a mist of folklore on Highway 16 3 years ago. She did not step into a tear in reality. She got into a vehicle, a machine made of stamped steel, rubber, and glass. Likely a 2008 to 2012 Dodge Ram or Chevy Silverado, gray or silver. Crew cab. I tell myself this every single day. I force the rationality down my own throat like bitter medicine. I tell myself that what happened to her is a statistical anomaly, a tragic convergence of bad timing and a predatory opportunity on a 350-kilometer stretch of asphalt. But when you spend 3 years staring at the tree line of northern British Columbia, scanning for a specific shade of metallic gray, the rationality begins to fracture. You start to realize that the monsters are real. They just wear Carhartt jackets, drive below the speed limit, and pay for their gas with cash. It was October 14th, 2024, a Tuesday. The 3-year anniversary of the week my life effectively ended, or at least the week it stalled out, leaving me idling in neutral while the rest of the world sped past. I was in the driveway of my rental bungalow in Prince George, packing my truck. It's a white 2019 Ford F-150, intentionally nondescript, the kind of vehicle that blends into the fleet traffic of the logging industry. The morning air was crisp, hovering around 4 degrees Celsius, that specific northern chill that smells of wet concrete and decaying leaves. I could see my breath pluming in the air as I loaded the gear. I methodically checked every item. This was not a vacation. It was a grid search disguised as a camping trip. Item 1. The Coleman Triton 2-burner propane stove. Green enamel, chipped on the left corner. Item 2. A North Face Stormbreak 2 tent. Bright yellow rainfly. I hated the color, it made me visible, but I told myself I needed to be seen if I got hurt. Item 3. My Pelican case containing the cameras. 2 trail cams I planned to set up near the logging road off the Escamsix River. The exact spot where the cell tower pinged Emma's phone for the last time. Item 4. The weapon. A canister of Sabre wild bear spray. The label promised it could stop a charging grizzly from 30 feet. I hoped it worked on other mammals, too. I zipped up my jacket. A Helly Hansen shell that made a distinct swish-swish sound against the nylon of the seats, and climbed into the cab. The interior smelled of stale Tim Hortons coffee and the Little Trees black ice air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. I plugged my iPhone into the dash. No music today. Just the downloaded episodes of a true crime podcast covering the Highway of Tears, and my own voice memos. I started the engine. The Ford rumbled to life, a steady, comforting vibration through the steering wheel. I checked the time. 6:15 a.m. Okay? I whispered to the empty cab. Let's go find him. The drive west from Prince George to Smithers is a long, hypnotic ribbon of gray. Highway 16. The road is beautiful in a way that feels hostile. To the south, the endless rolling hills. To the north, the mountains rising like jagged teeth against the overcast sky. The trees here, spruce, pine, fir, grow so thick they form a wall. You not see 5 feet into the bush from the shoulder. Anything could be in there. Anyone. I kept the cruise control set at 105 kilometers per hour. I was not in a rush. The goal was observation. Every time a gray pickup truck appeared in the opposing lane, my heart rate would spike. My eyes would lock onto the grille, the headlights, the driver. Is that a 2010 Dodge? No, the headlights are too angular. That SA 2016. Is that a Chevy? No, the color is wrong. That pewter, not silver. It was exhausting. It was a mental flaying that happened every 30 seconds. I stopped in Burns Lake around 9 o'clock a.m. for fuel and coffee. The Husky station was busy. Loggers, tourists in RVs, locals grabbing energy drinks. I stood at the pump, the nozzle vibrating in my hand, watching the flow of diesel. 124.9 cents per liter. The smell of the fuel was sharp and oily, coating the back of my throat. I went inside to pay. The bell above the door chimed. A cheerful ding-ding that felt obscenely bright compared to my mood. I grabbed a bag of Jack Link's teriyaki beef jerky and a bottle of Smart Water. My diet on these trips was purely functional. Calories and hydration. No pleasure. Heading west? The cashier asked. She was an older woman, maybe 60, with dyed red hair and glasses on a chain. Her name tag said, Brenda. Yeah. Towards Terrace, I said, tapping my card on the reader. She looked at me, really looked at me, over the rim of her glasses. Be careful on that road. Weather's supposed to turn tonight. Snow in the passes. I have winter tires, I said, the standard deflection. It's not just the snow, she muttered, turning back to her screen. Radio said a girl went missing near Vanderhoof last week. Just keep your eyes open. A cold spike drove itself through my stomach. Another one? I had not heard. I wanted to ask more, to pull out my notebook, to ask if she'd seen a gray truck. But I did not. I could not be that guy today. I just nodded, took my receipt, and walked out. The rest of the drive was a blur of static and rain. The weather Brenda predicted hit around Smithers. The sky dropped low, a heavy blanket of charcoal clouds, and the rain began to fall in sheets. It drummed against the roof of the truck, a chaotic rhythm that drowned out the hum of the tires. I passed the spot near the Morris River where the hiker had found Emma's backpack. I did not stop. I could not look at that gully again. I knew every rock, every fern, every inch of dirt in that ditch. I knew how her backpack had been found. Unzipped, contents scattered. No blood, just discarded. By the time I reached the turnoff for the logging road near the Excampsix River, it was 3:30 p.m. The light was already failing, the day surrendering to the premature twilight of the north. This was the place. The last ping. I slowed the truck, the tires crunching on the gravel shoulder, and turned onto the unpaved track. The transition was immediate. The smooth hum of the highway vanished, replaced by the violent jarring of the suspension as the truck fought against the ruts and potholes. The forest closed in instantly. The trees here were ancient, draped in moss that hung like ragged curtains. I drove for 45 minutes, crawling at 20 kilometers per hour, heading deeper into the labyrinth of service roads that serviced the logging cuts. I was looking for a specific clearing, a landing used by trucks to turn around, which Frank, the old hunter, had mentioned. He said he saw the gray Dodge here, blocking the road 3 years ago. The rational part of my brain, the paramedic, said, "You are wasting your time. He is not here. He was here once 3 years ago. You are chasing a ghost." But the other part of me, the brother, whispered, "Predators have territories. They have hunting grounds. They return to the places where they felt powerful." The clearing was a scar in the forest, a flat expanse of compacted mud and gravel about the size of a basketball court. It was surrounded on all sides by a dense wall of hemlock and cedar. The rain had softened to a drizzle, a fine mist that clung to everything like sweat. I killed the engine. Silence. That was the first thing that hit me. Not the peaceful silence of a library, but the heavy, oppressive silence of a room where an argument has just ended. The engine ticked as it cooled. Tick, tick, tick. The only mechanical sound in a world of organic dampness. I opened the door and stepped out. My Blundstone boots sank an inch into the mud with a wet sucking sound. The air smelled different here than on the highway. Smelled of deep, wet rot, decomposing needles, fungus, stagnant water. It was the smell of the earth digesting itself. I grabbed my jacket and zipped it to the chin. The temperature had dropped significantly. My truck's thermometer read 2 degrees. "Okay," I said aloud. My voice sounded flat, instantly swallowed by the trees. Camp first. I worked with practiced efficiency. I laid out the footprint of the tent on the driest patch of ground I could find, near the edge of the clearing but not under the drip line of the trees. The nylon rustled loudly as I threaded the aluminum poles. Snap, click, slide. The tent rose, a yellow blister on the gray landscape. I set up the Coleman stove on the tailgate of the truck. I connected the green propane canister, hearing the hiss of gas before clicking the igniter. A blue flame blossomed with a whoosh. I filled a small pot with water from a jerry can and set it to boil. Dinner was a Mountain House freeze-dried pouch, beef stroganoff. I hated the texture, mushy noodles and salty, reconstituted meat, but it was hot. I stood by the tailgate, eating directly from the pouch with a long plastic spork, watching the tree line. That S when I felt it. It was not a noise. It was not a movement. It was a biological alarm bell ringing in the base of my skull. The hair on my arms stood up beneath my fleece and jacket. I slowly lowered the spoon. I scanned the perimeter of the clearing. The light was fading fast, the shadows between the trees deepening into absolute black. Nothing. Just trees. Just wet wood and dripping moss. You re-paranoid, I told myself. You been driving for 9 hours. You re-jacked up on caffeine and grief. There's no one here. But the feeling persisted. It was the sensation of being observed. I knew this feeling from work, walking into a house where a domestic dispute had happened, before you see the person with the knife. The air feels charged. I decided to check the trail cams I had brought. I walked to the edge of the clearing, intending to strap one to a tree facing the road entrance. I froze. About 50 meters down the logging road, just at the bend where I had driven in, there was a shape. It was not a bear. It was not a moose. It was a figure, standing perfectly still. I squinted through the mist. The figure was wearing a dark raincoat, hood up. They were standing in the middle of the road, looking toward the clearing. Looking at me. My heart slammed against my ribs. Thump thump. Thump thump. Hello, I called out. My voice cracked slightly. Can I help you? The figure did not move. They did not wave. They did not shout back. They just stood there, a silhouette against the graying light. Rationality kicked in. A hunter. Or another logger scouting timber. Or someone whose car broke down. I have a satellite phone if you need help. I yelled louder this time. The figure turned slowly, deliberately, and walked into the trees. They did not turn around and walk down the road. They stepped directly into the dense, tangled bush where there was no trail. I stood there for a full minute, waiting for them to reappear, waiting for the sound of snapping branches. Silence. I turned back to the truck, my movements suddenly jerky and fast. I grabbed the bear spray from the passenger seat and clipped it to my belt. I checked the lock on the truck doors. I threw the trail cams back into the cab. I was not setting them up. Not now. I went back to the stove to turn off the gas. The water was boiling over, sizzling on the burner. Hiss, hiss. As I reached for the knob, I noticed something on the ground near the rear tire of my truck. It was a cigarette butt. I crouched down to look at it. It was wet, the paper dissolving, but the filter was intact. It was a Player S plane. I do not smoke. I touched the filter. It was cold, soggy. It had been there for a while. Maybe a day, maybe 2, but the placement, it was right next to my tire. As if someone had been standing exactly where I was standing now, leaning against a truck that was not there anymore. Or maybe they had been waiting. I did not sleep in the tent. That would have been suicide. I collapsed the north face tent, shoving the wet nylon into the bed of the truck without bothering to fold it. I threw the stove in after it. I climbed into the cab of the F-150 and locked the doors. I reclined the driver's seat as far back as it would go. I had the keys in the ignition, ready to turn. My hand rested on the canister of bear spray in the cup holder. It was just a hunter, I repeated mentally. Just a local. They probably thought I was poaching. That's why they did not speak. The sun was gone now. The forest was a wall of black ink. The only light came from the dashboard clock. 1942. I sat there for an hour, listening to the rain pick up again. It sounded like gravel being thrown against the metal roof. At 8:15 p.m., I saw headlights. They appeared in the rearview mirror, two piercing beams cutting through the darkness of the logging road behind me. They were bouncing violently, suggesting a heavy vehicle moving fast over the potholes. My hand tightened on the keys. If they blocked the road, I not get out. The clearing was a dead end. The only way out was the way I came in, and that S where the lights were coming from. The vehicle slowed as it entered the clearing. It swung wide, the headlights sweeping across the trees, illuminating the wet bark in stark white relief, before settling on my truck. It was a pickup. My breath caught in my throat. It was a Dodge Ram, crew cab, third generation, maybe 2006 or 2008. But it was not gray. It was black, or maybe a very dark blue. It was hard to tell under the layer of mud that coated the panels up to the windows. The truck idled about 20 feet away, facing me. The headlights were blinding, flooding my cabin with light. I could not see the driver. The glare on his windshield was impenetrable. I lowered my window about 2 inches. Just a crack. The other truck's engine was loud. A diesel rattle. Something was wrong with the muffler. It had a low, guttural chug that vibrated in my chest. We just sat there, 2 steel cages facing off in the wilderness. Then, the driver's door of the Dodge opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, heavy-set. He wore a dirty orange high-visibility vest over a brown Carhartt jacket. He had a baseball cap pulled low. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a guy you'd see at any job site in BC. He walked toward my truck. His gait was uneven, a slight limp on the left side. He held his hands up, palms open, showing he was not holding a weapon. I rolled the window down another inch. "Can I help you?" I shouted over the rain. He stopped 5 feet from my door. He was older than I expected, maybe mid-50s. His face was weathered, deeply lined, with a gray stubble beard. But his eyes were completely blank. Not angry, just empty, like a fish on ice. "Battery is dying," he said. His voice was gravelly, like he de-smoked a pack a day for 40 years. "Alternator is shot. Need a jump to get back to the main road." My mind raced. Alternator? If his alternator is shot, the truck would die instantly if he turned it off. But he left it running. "I do not have cables," I lied. I had a heavy-duty set behind the seat. He looked at the truck, then back at me. He did not blink. "You got a Ford. F-150s usually come with a kit." "It's a rental," I said. "Empty." He stared at me. The rain dripped from the brim of his hat, running down his nose. He did not wipe. I threw in the detail about the phone as a threat. "I can call for help." The man's eyes shifted slightly, glancing toward the creek line, then back to me. A slow smile spread across his face. It did not reach his eyes. It was a mechanical movement of muscles. "Fishing," he repeated. "In October? In the dark? Night fishing," I said. "For sturgeon." "There ai not no sturgeon in the Excampsix," he said softly. My stomach dropped. I had made a mistake. "I not help you with the jump. You should probably head out while your battery still has juice." He took a step closer. He was close enough now that I could smell him. He did not smell like the woods. He smelled of old cigarettes, stale sweat, and something sweet, like antiseptic, or formaldehyde. He reached out and tapped his knuckles against my window glass. Tap, tap, tap. "You look like someone," he said. I froze. "What?" "You look like a girl I saw out here, couple years back. Similar eyes." The world stopped. The sound of the rain faded. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. Emma. He was talking about Emma. He had to be. "Who?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Who did you see?" He leaned in closer, his face inches from the glass. I could see the broken capillaries in his nose. "Just a girl," he whispered, "looking for a ride. She found one." He straightened up suddenly, the smile vanishing. He looked at my truck, then back at his Dodge. "Guess I'll risk it," he said. "Drive safe." He turned and walked back to his truck. He did not look back. He climbed in, slammed the door, and threw it into reverse. The Dodge spun around, mud spraying from the tires, and tore out of the clearing. I sat there, shaking. My hands were vibrating so hard I could not grip the steering wheel. He knew. He knew who I was. Or he knew who she was. And then the realization hit me like a physical blow. The truck was black. But under the mud, in the light of my headlights, had I seen a patch of gray? Was the door panel replaced? Or was I just seeing what I wanted to see? I reached for the ignition to start the truck, to get the hell out of there. Click. Silence. I turned the key again. Click. Nothing. The dashboard lights flickered and died. My battery was dead. I looked at the dashboard. I had not left the lights on. I had not left the radio on. Then I remembered. While he was talking to me, while he was distracting me, I had heard a sound. A faint snip from the other side of the truck. I had been so focused on the man, so focused on his face, that I had not checked the mirrors. Was he alone? I scrambled to lock the door, but it was electric. Without power, the locks would not engage. I had to manually push the pins down. I sat in the dark, in a dead truck, miles from the highway. And then, from the tree line where the first figure had disappeared, I heard a whistle. It was a tune. A jaunty, upbeat tune. Pop goes the weasel. The whistle hung in the air, disjointed and off-key, like a child practicing a song they half remembered. It was not coming from the road. It was coming from the dense scrub to the left of the truck, the blind side where the shadows were thickest. My first instinct was to scream. My second, the paramedic instinct, was to triage the situation. Status: vehicle disabled. Mobile platform compromised. Environment: hostile. Temperature dropping. Zero visibility. Threat: active. At least 2 subjects. One confirmed male, heavy build. One unknown. I did not scream. I moved. I manually pushed down the lock pin on the driver's door. It made a plastic thunk that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I scrambled over the center console, my boots kicking the dashboard, and shoved the passenger lock down. I checked the rear doors. Locked. I was sealed in. But a Ford F-150 is not a fortress. It's a greenhouse made of tempered glass. I grabbed the Sabre Wild Bear spray from the cup holder. I removed the safety clip with a shaking thumb. The canister felt cold and heavy, a sleek aluminum cylinder of false hope. "Hey!" I yelled. My voice sounded thin, pathetic inside the cab. "I have a gun. I have a firearm and I will shoot." A lie. A stupid, desperate lie. The whistling stopped. Then, laughter. Not a maniacal movie villain cackle. Just a short, sharp ha-ha from the darkness. It was dismissive. It was the sound a butcher makes when the cattle flinch. I sat in the driver's seat, my back pressed against the door, trying to see everything at once. The condensation was starting to build on the inside of the windows, a fog of my own panicked breath turning the world outside into gray smears. Think. They had done this while the big man distracted me with his performance. It was a hunting tactic. One flushes the prey, the other sets the trap. I looked at my iPhone. 12%. A man in a dark Dodge Ram, possibly black or dark blue, crew cab, disabled my vehicle. There is a second person in the woods. If you find this, check the wheel wells. Check the undercarriage. They are hunting me. I had only the rhythm of my own pulse. Thump, thump, thump. Around 9:00 p.m., the rain stopped. The silence that followed was worse. The rain had been a curtain, a white noise masking the subtle sounds of the forest. Now the acoustic landscape was wide open. Crunch. A twig snapping. 10 meters away. 5. Scrape. Fabric against bark. They were not leaving. They were circling. I realized then that they were not going to break the window. If they wanted to kill me quickly, they would have thrown a rock through the glass 5 minutes ago. They would have dragged me out. No, this was something else. This was entertainment. I slid down from the seat into the footwell of the passenger side. It was a tight squeeze. I am 6'1". I had to curl my knees to my chest, my head resting against the glove compartment. The floor mat smelled of rubber and dried mud. I wedged myself there, clutching the bare spray, making myself as small as possible. If I could not see them, maybe they could not see me. The cold began to seep into the cabin around 10 p.m. The metal body of the truck was a heat sink, leaching the warmth out of the air. I could see my breath now, faint plumes in the dark. My toes, inside the blundstones, began to numb. Hypothermia, my brain catalogued. Mild stage. My lungs burned. The light moved slowly, methodically. It did not jerk around. It was searching. It hit the passenger seat backrest. It moved down. It stopped on my boot. I had not pulled my foot back far enough. The light held there, steady, unblinking. I could feel the heat of the gaze behind it. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was tapping on the rear passenger window, right behind my head. David, a voice whispered. It was not the smoker's voice. This voice was higher, smoother. Young. David, come out. We just want to talk about Emma. My blood froze into slush. They knew my name. How? The wallet. I had left my wallet in the center console when I got the jerky out earlier. She said you could fix anything. Tears, the sounds changed. I squeezed my eyes shut and hummed a single note internally, a white noise to drown out the sound of the suspension springs. I did not answer. I bit my tongue until I tasted copper. Fine, he said. We'll wait. You have to come out eventually. Humans need water. Humans need to piss. He rolled off the roof. The truck bounced violently, then settled. Silence returned. This time the silence lasted. I drifted into a state that was not sleep, but was not wakefulness. It was a gray fugue of terror. I hallucinated. I saw Emma's face in the patterns of condensation on the window. She looked pale, her hair matted with pine needles. Why did not you come for me? The condensation seemed to say. I tried. I whispered. I checked my phone. For percent. I did not turn it on. I saved it. I waited for the sunrise like a religious man waits for the Messiah. The morning did not arrive with a burst of glory. It arrived as a slow, creeping grayness. The charcoal sky lightened to the color of a bruised lung. I watched the trees take shape through the fogged windows. First, they were just vertical shadows. Then they became trunks, then I could see the texture of the bark. I waited until I could see the color of the moss, a dull green, before I moved. My body was a wreck. My neck was locked in a spasm. My legs were pins and needles. I pulled myself up to the seat, wincing as the blood rushed back into my extremities. I scanned the clearing. Empty. The woods were still. No figures. No dark Dodge Ram. I wiped the window with my sleeve. I looked at the mud. There were tire tracks. Fresh ones. Deep ruts where the Dodge had spun its tires leaving. But there were also footprints. Dozens of them. They were all around the truck. Muddy prints on the running boards. Handprints smeared in the grime on the windows. They had been touching the glass. While I hid in the footwell, they had been standing right there, pressing their hands against the window, watching me. I unlocked the door. Felt heavy. I pushed it open and fell out onto the wet gravel. My legs gave way and I collapsed into the mud. I did not care. I dry heaved, my empty stomach contracting violently, but nothing came up except bile. I forced myself to stand. I had to leave. Now, I walked to the front of the truck. The hood was unlatched. I lifted it. The battery cable had not just been cut. It had been severed, and the battery itself had been smashed, likely with a hammer. Acid and plastic shards were scattered over the engine block. Okay, I said. My voice was a croak. Okay. I ran to the back of the truck. My gear, the tent, the stove was still there, but the tent, the yellow rainfly had been slashed to ribbons. It looked like it had been attacked by a frenzied animal. But the cuts were straight, razor cuts, and on the tailgate, scratched into the paint with a key or a knife, was a message. She screamed louder than you. I stared at the words. the jagged letters cut down to the white primer. I did not feel fear anymore. I felt a cold, hard crystallization of hate. I grabbed my pack. I did not bother with the tent or the stove. I left them there as a monument. I took the water, the bear spray, and my keys. I started walking. It was 15 kilometers to the highway. I walked it in 3 hours. I walked with the saber canister in my hand, my thumb on the trigger, daring the forest to move. I did not look back. I listened to the gravel crunch under my boots, a steady marching rhythm. A logging truck picked me up near the junction. The driver was a young guy, maybe 25, listening to country music. "Car trouble?" he asked, eyeing my mud-caked clothes. "Battery died," I said. "Need a ride to the RCMP detachment in Terrace." He looked at me, sensing the vibe, and did not ask any more questions. The police report was an exercise in futility. I knew it as I was giving it. The officer, Constable Evans, was polite. He took notes. He frowned at the picture of the scratches on the tailgate I showed him on my phone, which had died 10 seconds later. "We'll send a patrol car out to check the vehicle," he said, "but without a license plate. And these service roads are a maze. It's hard to track anyone down." "It was a black or dark blue Dodge," I said. "Crew cab. Modified exhaust. Driver has a limp." "We'll put it in the system," he said. "The system. The same system that lost Emma." I paid a tow truck driver $600 to retrieve the Ford that afternoon. When he brought it back to the depot, the mechanic looked at the engine. "Hell of a vandalism job," the mechanic said, wiping his hands on a rag. "But hey, you lucky." "Lucky?" I asked. "Yeah, they cut the battery, smashed the terminals. But they did not touch the brake lines. Usually, these guys out here, if they want to hurt you, they cut the lines." I looked at the F-150. I looked at the scratch on the tailgate. She screamed louder than you. I flew back to Prince George the next day. I could not drive. I could not be on that road. Not yet. 6 months later, I was back at work. I was intubating a stroke victim in the back of an ambulance when a news alert popped up on my partner's phone. "RCMP investigates suspicious fire near Terrace." I read the article later. A logging truck had found a burnt-out vehicle deep in the woods off the Xcamsix River Road. It had been torched, accelerated with gasoline. The police identified the vehicle from the VIN on the chassis. It was a 2009 Dodge Ram, reported stolen from Alberta 4 years ago. Inside the burnt cabin, they found remnants of camping gear and a collection of driver's licenses. 12 of them. They did not release the names. But I knew. I sat in the break room of the hospital, staring at the white linoleum floor. The smell of antiseptic was strong, but for a second, I could smell the wet pine and the rot of the clearing. They burned the truck. They destroyed the evidence. But they did not burn the memory. And they made a mistake. The man with the limp. He thought he was terrorizing me. He thought he was playing with his food. But he gave me something the RCMP never did. He gave me confirmation. He gave me a face. And most importantly, he let me live. Which means the hunt is not over. I pulled out my notebook. I turned to a fresh page. Suspect description. Male, 50s. Heavy build. Limp in left leg. Smoker. Accomplice. Male, younger. Slender build. Whistler. Capped my pen. I am not a statistician anymore. I am not just a brother anymore. I am the one who is going to make sure they never find a 13th license.